Okay, good morning, everyone. Good morning to good morning to the people here at TSS in this overcast Sunday during a long weekend, and good morning to everyone following us online. Today we're gonna have our public lecture by our friend Patricky talking about Allan Kardec. But before we start, we're gonna have our initial reading by our friend Natalia.
Good morning. The opportunities for moral improvement that life allows should be taken advantage of wisely and immediately. The march of time is inevitable, and an occasion neglected is lost forever. Time and wind never come back. Thus, it is a liberating blessing to utilize every opportunity for unit growth. Stay alert in order to take the most advantage of the hours of your earthly existence.
Thank you. And with that, we're going to have our initial prayer. So invite everyone of you to close our eyes, elevate our thoughts to our Master Jesus, and try to be connected with the spirituality that surrounds us. Let us pray and thank you for this opportunity of being gathered here today in this space to learn about your word of Jesus, about your teachings, and to receive these blessings that are already surrounding us. Bless our friend Patricky, who will be delivering the lecture today. May he be inspired by the spirituality so he can deliver your message. Thanks so much and be with us today and always, and so be it.
Good morning. So, when I was preparing the lecture, we had a lecture, I would say, 2 weeks ago here, and Tiago was telling us about his way of preparing the lecture and starting to compile all the information. He said one thing that was, for me, was pretty interesting. That sometimes we are preparing the lecture, and the lecture is almost ready for us to come and give it here, but then we have like an insight or something like that, and then let's go and check what we remember or this insight that we had. And that happened very funnily with that lecture, and I needed to change almost 40% of the lecture after reading the new findings that I found for preparing it. And although I was born in Spiritism, I never really studied Kardec's life, right? So it was a very good opportunity for me as well to understand a little bit more about his life and how he prepared everything for us, or how he prepared everything that we know nowadays. So the first thing that I would like to add on that topic is Kardec was not a medium, right? Kardec was, as we say here, a regular guy, and he didn't have this connection or to speak directly to the spirits. And that for his work or for the work that he did was pretty important. So he could not get information from his side. He needed to relay in a lot of other mediums to build everything that he brought to us. But now getting a little bit to his life. So Kardec was born in October 3rd, 1804 in Lyon, France. And he was born in a very Roman Catholic family. And he was educated in a Protestant country. So since he was a kid, he could see the religious intolerance that we have here in our world. And that was a start for him to think that perhaps we should think in a religious reform or something like that, right? So that was his start to think about something like that. His family was pretty well known on the judiciary, and in the law, and his father was just a judge. And funny or not, in the past, it was pretty common for people to follow their parents. So let's say if his father was a judge or a lawyer, he would do the same thing. He would be a lawyer. Or if his father was a doctor, he should be a doctor, right? But Kardec decided a little bit different. He was really into science and philosophy, and that was the path that he decided to go. So in 1814, when he was just 10 years old, he moved to Switzerland in Yverdon to study with Pestalozzi. And studying with Pestalozzi was a big change on his career. And he got, or he stayed as one of the biggest followers of his teachings and everything that he learned there. So Pestalozzi was an amazing educator at the time, and the current system that we use nowadays, it has a lot of what he discovered or what he invented in the past, right? So basically, Pestalozzi believed that children should learn by example. So they should learn experiencing things, and that tests were not the best way for children to learn, or for us to check the knowledge that children had, right? He also defended a very important idea that shaped Kardec for his entire life and for the work that he did with Spiritism, that was not to judge or criticize the ideas and concept before analyzing it. So every time he got a new idea, he decided to go and check it, right? And another very important thing that Pestalozzi understood was that everyone should have access to education, right? So he had a lot of children that paid the tuition, of course, because he needed to survive. But he taught a lot of children that could not pay. So he taught for free, right? And basically, everyone got the same education. So Kardec was exposed to all of that, all this new concept, all these new ideas that Pestalozzi was developing at that time. And we cannot say that for sure, but we can imagine that was preparation on the spiritual side for all the work that Kardec would do in the future. And we will see during the lecture some things that happened with Kardec that guided him to the path that he followed in the future, and when he studied and wrote all the books that he did. But now talking a little bit about Kardec's adult life, I divided that into phases. So the first phase is the phase that Kardec dedicated his life to education. So Kardec dedicated his life to education for 31 years. And during this 31 years, he taught mathematics, physics, philosophy, chemistry, astronomy, and some other subjects as well. He wrote many books regarding education. And that would shape or help to change the educational system in France as well at the time. At the time, he also, with his wife, decided to open an institute at his house where they taught children, or underprivileged children, many subjects. And we need to remember that in the 1800s, education was not universal. People did not have access to education, right? So that was a pretty big change. And we can correlate that with the things that he learned when he was working or studying with Pestalozzi, right? And of course, since he helped all these children, people start judging him for that, right? Because people always thought this guy is pretty amazing, he's pretty smart, he has a lot of knowledge, he could use a lot that to other things and not just to help these children that do not have a future or do not deserve it or whatever we judge always, right? But he didn't care, so he continues his work, and that helped him to develop more patience, humility, and abnegation for all the work that he would do as well in the future, and for all the difficulties that he would encounter through his path. So, as we can see into here, Kardec could have been a very important or famous person in the past, right? But he chose a different path. He chose a path of helping and teaching people. And that connects a lot with everything that he did on his work and the way that he developed it. And just a brief note about his wife. So in 1832, he married Amélie Gabrielle Bourdeau, and she was also a teacher. And they taught together all the children at their house, right? But the most important fact about her is that she was the only one that always supported him through all the work that he did. Even when they did not have the money to pay their own bills, she was there helping and encouraging him for all the work. And a pretty interesting thing is she came from a very wealthy family. So she was used to have a pretty nice and comfortable life. So even though she decided to help him and to guide him through all the work. And before diving in on his job, on what he did and exactly for spiritism, I would just like to introduce a little bit where Kardec came from, because his name was Hippolyte Léon Denisard Revailloud, right? Oops. Don't worry, all good.
Put it a little bit down because of the noise.
Don't worry.
The noise is averted.
You're all awake.
Yep. So perhaps we should, someone is thinking, okay, but where does Kardec came from, right? And as I told you guys, he was a pretty known educator at the time. He had many and many books. He had many and many books that he wrote, right? And when he was almost at that time to launch, when he was almost at the time to launch his first, or to publish his first book, that was the Spirits book, he was pretty concerned about mixing both studies that he did, right? So the previous as an educator, and now the work that he was doing for Spiritism. So he decided to go with a name that one of the spirits, his protector spirit, that was called Spirit Z, with a name that he had in a previous incarnation as a druid, that was Allan Kardec. So when he launched his first book, or when he published the first book, Allan Kardec was born as a name, and as everyone here now knows him by Allan Kardec, right? But now let's dive a little bit in through his trajectory, through all the books, and how he got connected with everything that was happening. So in 1854, he met his friend, Mr. Fortier. And Mr. Fortier was the first person that connected Kardec with a phenomenon that was happening at the time, that was the turning tables. And the turning tables were, at the time, nothing more than just an entertainment. People were going to see the tables lifting and turning and etc. And everyone at the society in Paris in all over Europe as well, were doing it and practicing it. And Mr. Fortier was a magnetizer. And basically at the time, magnetism was just used with people in the past, or during that time, basically to do hypnosis to other people. And that was Mr. Fortier's job. And then when Mr. Fortier told Kardec about that, Mr. Kardec thought, okay, he was a guy of science, right? So he thought, okay, now we are studying in science electricity and magnetism. And perhaps mixing both, we could have turning tables or something like that. So he thought that would be a phenomenon that was being created by the people. Basically, he forgot about that for a period of time, right? But shortly later in the same year, he met Mr. Fortier again. And now Mr. Fortier told Kardec that the tables are not just turning anymore, but they are talking. And with that information, Kardec was a little bit shocked, because he was like, my God, how people think that the tables can talk, right? I would just believe, first, if I see it, and second, if someone can prove to me that a table has a brain to think and a nerve system to feel. So he thought Mr. Fortier was getting crazy. He just went to that opportunity again and followed with his life, right? But then in the next year, he met another friend, Mr. Carlotti, and they were friends for 25 years. So they knew each other pretty well. And Mr. Carlotti was the first person that understood that the phenomena of the turning tables could be related with some spirits. He didn't know how or why, but he understood that. And when he brought these ideas to Kardec, he sounded pretty confident or passionate about it. And since Kardec knew him very well, he knew that every time that something new happened, Mr. Carlotti was pretty passionate and impressed. So he didn't give a lot of attention, but Mr. Carlotti told him that he believed that one day Kardec would be with them studying what was happening with the turning tables. And that was the third time that Kardec had a connection or an interaction with people talking to him about the turning tables. But then later in the same year, 1855, Kardec meets Mr. Fortier again, his friend. But now Mr. Fortier takes Kardec to Mrs. Plain Amazon and Mr. Fortier's house. And they were doing some mediumistic meetings at their house. And Mr. Fortier was a very well-known person in the Paris society at that time. He was a very well-educated man, and he also worked to the government. So he was pretty rational. And when he told Kardec about everything that he saw and everything that was happening on his house in the mediumistic meetings, he told in a way that was pretty serious, and in a way that he showed Kardec that he rationalized everything that he was explaining. So when Mr. Fortier invited Kardec to go to the meeting, he accepted it. So in the next week, Kardec went to the first mediumistic meeting at their house and saw the turning tables in a very rudimentary way of psychographing that was with a pen or a pencil on the basket, right? And when he saw that, he understood that there was something more about that phenomena, that perhaps could not just be electricity or magnetism or whatever that was. And he understood that he needed to study and go to check what was happening. So after that meeting, everyone that had some notes or notebooks regarding everything that they took notes from all the 5 years, the last 5 years that they were studying or practicing magnetism, gave that notes to Kardec, so Kardec could read and understand. And people gave the notes not just because thought Kardec could do the work or because he was better, but Kardec had a pretty experiencing mind of doing the analysis and the synthesis of everything that he read, right? So he could compile everything. So at that same week, mainly, he started to go to the Baudin's family. And the Baudin's family, they had 2 daughters that were doing also mediumistic meeting at their house. So he started to go to their house to check these meetings as well. And the first conclusion that Kardec did from all the meetings that he was going and experiencing was that from all the talk and all the dialogues that he had with the spirits, he understood that the spirits were nothing more than the souls of the deceased. And that these deceased spirits or the persons, they have the knowledge accordingly to the moral and the intellectual advancement that spirits had, right? And that their opinion was not more than just a personal opinion. So here, it's a very important lesson that he got and he shared with us. And I will repeat that more times during the lecture. That is, first, the messenger is not important. The message that is brought to us is more important. So we cannot check if the messenger is really that person that he's saying, but we can always check the content of the message and if that makes sense or not, right? So regarding other messages that they received, and I'm saying they because there were meetings that Kardec was not present at the meetings. In April 30, 1856 was the first time that Kardec, that a medium received for Kardec a message saying that, telling him about the mission that he had, about writing everything and studying spiritism, right? And this message was also confirmed to other mediumistic meetings that Kardec was not present. So in June 12th, on the same year, Kardec asked the Spirit of Truth what could make him fail his mission, right? Now he understood a little bit of what was his mission. He wanted to understand what would make him fail the mission. So the Spirit of Truth warned him about some things. And the first thing that he warned him was that he should not just stay at his house writing and analyzing and publishing the books. He should be out there participating on the mediumistic meetings, participating where people were criticizing what he was writing. So be in the middle of the conflict and understanding everything. The second thing is that he would be betrayed for those who seems to be most devoted to the work and to what they were doing together. Another thing is that Kardec would more than once succumb to fatigue. So he would get very, very tired and he would get sick with that. And that Kardec would have a constant conflict or a constant fight with himself to sustain he would need to sustain the cost of his rest, his peace of mind, his health, and even his life. Because doing this work would reduce Kardec's life expectancy, right? So I don't know you guys, but just with this warning, I think I would be a little bit shocked, but okay. But the very comfortable thing that the Spirit of Truth told Kardec was that the good spirits would be with him all the way through. So they would help him in all the matters that he needed. And all the matters that doesn't mean that it would be comfortable or it would be easy, but that they would be there helping him. So now diving it a little bit into the publishings and the books that he wrote. In 1855, 1856, the mediumistic meetings that they were having were not serious, right? They were more for entertainment or asking random questions to the spirits about everything that people wanted. So Kardec understood that needed to change, and he needed to follow a pattern. So he started to organize pre-prepared questions that were meticulously organized so he could ask to the spirits. And at that moment, everyone that was participating on the meetings started to feel and to see a change on how things were changing, and the meeting were getting more serious. So everyone that was there just for the fun part or to do random questions to the spirits, they stopped going because that was not the purpose anymore. And everyone that was really serious about the work and wanted to understand more the phenomena that was occurring stayed. And then on that year, Kardec started to go to Mr. Austin and Mr. Jaffet weekly mediumistic meetings and other meetings as well. So Kardec was starting to go to a lot of mediumistic meetings to understand more, get more information, talk to other mediums, right? And he understood that at that point he had a lot of information with him, but he understood that he needed to check that information, and the only way that he understood at the time that he could check it was sending the same questions to all different kinds of mediums, and he had more than 10 that applied to do that for him. So send the questions and gather the answers and analyze the answers and if they were the same or not. So after receiving all, sending and receiving, he did a comparison and a summary of everything that he had and started on working on his first book. But when he was working on the first book, one of the days late at night, when he was writing it, he started to hear some knockings. So he was writing, he started to hear someone knocking at the wall. And every time he stand up to check what it is, the knocking stopped. Every time he sat down again to continue his writing, the knocking continued. And his wife was also hearing it. So he decided that on the next day, on the Baudin's family house, when he was at the mediumistic meeting, he would ask the spirits if it was them, and if it was, why that was happening. So on the next day, he went to this meeting, and the first question that he asks is not about the sound, but if he has a spiritual guide that was guiding his work, right? And the spirits told him that yes, he had. He could ask any questions that the spirit was there and was more than happy to answer anything that he wanted to ask. So the first thing that Kardec asks him was like, okay, yesterday at my house, the knockings, was that you? And the spirit told him, yeah, that was me. Okay, but why are you knocking? I wanted to get your attention. Okay? And Kardec wanted to understand a little bit more of why he wanted attention, right? And the spirits told him that he wanted to get the attention because Kardec was writing something wrong on the chapter that he was writing. And Kardec almost in the same time said, oh, don't worry. I just wrote everything again. I woke up this morning. I got that. I wrote it wrong. And I wrote everything again this morning. So you don't need to be worried about that. And the spirit tells him, yeah, and it's still wrong. So go back, check between lines Y and Z, and you will find a mistake. And just to complete the story, before continuing with the conversation of the spirit, Kardec went home after the meeting and checked exactly between the lines that the Spirit told him, and he found a huge mistake that he could not understand how he wrote that. He fixed it, and then he published the book later, and then we would discuss that. But another thing that Kardec asked to the Spirit is, how can I call you? What's your name, right? And the Spirit answered to him that for Kardec, his name was the truth, right? And then Kardec asked, okay, and who were you when you were incarnated? Were you famous? Were you not, right? And the Spirit told him, hey, that's not important for you to know. And that was the second time that Kardec was like, okay, perhaps the messenger is not important. The message is important, right? And the Spirit of Truth guided him through all the works that he did and gave him 15 minutes every month for him to ask whatever he wanted to ask. So every month, for 15 minutes, Kardec had a direct conversation through a medium with the Spirit of Truth. So after that meeting, in 1st of January 1857, Kardec published the first exemplar of the magazine, the Spiritist magazine. And he financed it directly from his pocket. And this information for us, it's pretty important because if you remember, as we talked in the beginning of the lecture, he wasn't a rich guy. Sometimes he didn't have money to pay his bills or to buy medicine or whatever it was. But later, many years later, Kardec told that that was one of the best decisions that he did, not asking for money, because he could publish whatever he thought was good on the magazine. And that was important because he used the magazine to test or to publish everything that he was gathering on the mediumistic meetings. So he was testing some questions there. He was testing some content. He was publishing some things there. On the same year, in 1857, April 1st, he opened in his house in Paris, the Paris Spiritist Society. So that was the first Spiritist society that we had working in his house. And the main reason for the society was to study and contribute to this new doctrine that was being established. Because if we think nowadays, for us, it's kind of hard to find a spirit center outside Brazil, right? We have some spirit centers, but it's not perhaps in the big cities like Toronto. If you go away from Toronto, I would say 1 hour and a half, perhaps it's pretty hard to find one. And I'm saying about Canada, we can talk about Europe or Asia or whatever it is. But let's imagine at that time that Spiritism was pretty new. Nobody knew about it. So they needed a place where they could gather together and study, right? And the Spiritist Society, or the Spiritist Center, grew very fast. So they needed to rent a place. And I'm just bringing this story up because, as we can see, spirituality was guiding him through all the path, right? At the time, France was being governed by Napoleon, and they needed a permit to have meetings with more than 20 people. And there were very few people that could give this permit. But believe it or not, one of the generals that could give the permit was studying with Kardec. So for them, it was pretty fast and easy to get this permit. So on the same year, in 1857, Kardec published the first book, the Spirit's book, with 501 questions. And now, perhaps some of you are confused or not, because if we check the Spirit's book now, we can see that the book has 1,019 questions. That was because he published a second edition, not correcting anything that he did on the first one, but just adding more questions and answers. And the main reason for the Spirit's book, as we now know, is questions and answers that Kardec asked to the spirit and got as answers, so we could understand a little bit more about the spiritual world. And the book is divided in 3 parts. So basically, the first one is the primary causes, second, spiritist or spirit world, and moral laws. And as I spoke earlier, all these questions were tested. So everything that he added on the book was tested. There are other contents that he didn't add on the book because he wasn't 100% sure that that was true. He just added on the book was what he really understood and could gather information that that was the right answer. So in 1859, he published the book, What is Spiritism? And that's a book that nowadays I don't think we speak a lot of it, and perhaps we don't read it a lot. But at the time, that was pretty important because, as we discussed, we didn't have Spiritism at the time. And this book was more an introduction about the philosophy of Spiritism, about the dialogues addressing the common questions and misconceptions, right? But more than that, it outlined the fundamental principles of the Spiritism, including the existence of the nature of spirits, the reincarnation, and the moral progression. And then in 1861, he published the Mediums book. And the Mediums book explains a little bit for us about the connection about our world and the spiritual world, and how that works and how we can do it. And it is a guide for people to do the mediumistic meetings in a safe, respectful, and a right way. It also helped and still helps people to understand what is the mediumship, right? Because if we think now we have the book for, I would say 200 years, I didn't do the math, but let's say 200 years, we still have people that never heard about it, or if they don't believe, that's another thing, but that never heard about it, right? Let's imagine at the time that a lot of people were suffering with the mediumship, and not just saying suffering because, right, but needed to understand a little bit it. And this book gave way for people to work with it. But the most important thing is how the book shows to us the moral side that the medium needs to have during the mediumistic meetings and the mediumistic work. And then in 1864, he published The Gospel According to Spiritism. And a funny part about the Gospel, when Kardec decided to write the Gospel, he went to a cottage that he was used to when he wanted to be alone, right? And when he wanted to put his ideas in order or in place. And nobody knew that Kardec was thinking on writing a new book or writing this book. Not even Mr. Didier. And Mr. Didier was the publisher of the book, right? And the funny part of that was when Kardec was writing, or he had finished the book before showing the first person, that was Mr. Didier, a medium in Bordeaux got a message. And at the beginning of the message says so: a new book has just appeared. It is a brighter light that comes to illuminate your path. And on the book, Posthum's work, that I'm not sure if that is translated to English or not. I could not find it translated, but I don't think it is. There's a summary from this message that I would just like to read it pretty fast. In this communication, the Spirit of Truth emphasizes the importance of the newly published work, highlighting that it represents a brighter light to guide humanity. He recalls his mission of bringing God's word to the people of goodwill 18 centuries ago, and notes that this word has been forgotten by most, stifled by disbelief and materialism. However, he stated that by order of the eternal, good spirits are now spread across the globe to sound the resounding trumpet, inviting all to listen to their voices, which aim to show the path that leads to the feet of the Heavenly Father. Sorry if somewhere in the translation was not the best because I did it. But I think the most important part is first giving credit, a lot of credit to the book that Kardec wrote. And second, this message was published by Kardec on the Spiritist magazine on the same year, 1864. But Kardec was a pretty humble man. And as we discussed here previously, and he taught us through many and many books. So we can see that on the Gospel, we can see that on the Medium's book, on the book, the Spirit's book. The messenger is not important. So even though when we read this message, we can think that the message came from Jesus, Kardec never said a word about that. He would not dare to say who was the messenger. But what he was carrying was just the message. In 1865, he published the book Heaven and Hell. And with that book, he broke many centuries of concepts about the heaven and hell, about going to the hell and suffering for eternity, or the opposite, going to heaven and playing harp the entire day and just being sitting there, right? About separating families or children going to the hell and how unjust that would be. So another thing that he brings with that book is the concept of the eternal suffering and how that would be, or how that would not match with the good God and the forgiveness that God has with us, his children, right? And this book is divided in two parts by Kardec. And the second, the one that I was talking was the first part, and the second part is the part where Kardec brings a lot of conversations that he had with the spirits. So basically with three order of spirits: the suffering ones, the spirits that were in the middle of the way, so they were not happy, they were not suffering, and happy spirits. And with these conversations, we can understand a little bit about what they did, what they were suffering, or what was their situation. And that book is a pretty interesting book because I was raised in a Spiritist family, right? So I go to Spirit centers my entire life, and I heard that was a pretty hard book to read. So I was like, okay, and one day perhaps I will read it or not. And then one of the lectures here, I heard that was a pretty interesting book, and it was not so hard. So I just got and read it, and it is not a hard book to read, but it's a pretty interesting book. So if you have not read it, I would suggest it. It's a pretty nice reading. So in 1868, Kardec was really, really sick at that time, but he published his last book, Genesis. And Genesis talks about evolution of our planet, about the transition that we are undergoing now as a planet, and about other planets. And to be pretty honest, I cannot comment a lot on that book because I have never read it. I started hearing the audiobook, so perhaps in a few months I can give you a feedback on that, perhaps in another lecture. So in 1869, March 31st, Kardec died. He was buried in the Laquies cemetery in France. And for what I heard, his tomb is the only one that has flowers the entire year, right? if you have the opportunity, people say it's a interesting place to visit. Wouldn't say nice, but interesting. It's a cemetery, right? So, to conclude, I think it is, we need to be pretty grateful and thankful for everything that Kardec did and all the work that he put together. If we analyze, it took him 11, 12 years to write everything and compile everything, right? And I don't think we can imagine all the work and all the effort that he added here. And I think one of the most important things that he brought to us is about the blind faith, right? And I want just to read a part of the introduction of the posthumous workbook that states a little bit about it. So faith requires a foundation, and that foundation is a perfect understanding of what one is to believe. To believe, it is not enough to see, above one must understand. Blind faith is no longer suited to the century. It is precisely the dogma of blind faith that is responsible for the large number of non-believers today, because it seeks to impose itself and demands the abolition of the most precious faculties of humankind, reasoning and free will. So with that, I think the invitation to us is, let's read everything that he brought to us. Let's read all the other books that came after him, through Chico, through Divaldo. If you want, we have our study group here on Wednesday as well that we can study together and discuss. So we do not fail on the blind faith. And just a comment, not now regarding the lecture, just deviating a little bit on the lecture. I think most of you heard or read that this week we lost one of the most famous speakers about spiritism, right? And Divaldo published more than 250 books. That alone would be very impressive. But I think the thing that touched me more was that he adopted more than 600 kids. And all the social work that he did and the charity that he created on Mansão do Caminho that helped thousands and thousands of people every year. So I think the message is, let's be thankful for having him and for the example that he was for us through all the years, and try to get a little bit better every day, right? Thank you. Okay.
Why did he choose to use the name Allan Kardec? Why this name?
Perhaps I'm not the right person to answer that. I could get back on that. But for what I understood was the name that his protector spirit gave to him, that one of the names that he used in a previous life as he was a Druid, right? I don't know if he had other information about other names, but I would guess no. But the reason, for what I know, is this one. But I can get back on for her on that if there was other option.
I think also his intention was to separate his scholar work, his academic work as a teacher, professor, from the work in spiritism.
Exactly, exactly.
Sorry, I may have missed this. I thought you said Allan Kardec was not a medium.
Yeah.
But then you mentioned that he would actually consult other mediums to be able to ask the questions. But when you mentioned about the knocking and the spirit of truth, when he spoke to the spirit of truth, was him speaking and the spirit of truth speaking with him, or did he have to see the other mediums to get this information?
He was with a medium. So basically the knocking was in one day, and he went on the next day to a mediumistic meeting. So the knocking was a materialistic phenomena, right? So like a knocking, like we are hearing here. But he didn't communicate on the same day with the spirit. That was on the next day when he was on the mediumistic meeting, that through a medium he asked through the spirit of truth.
So regarding this.
Don't worry.
So when he was asking about the question where he would have illness by doing this work, and that that God would be with him, or the Spirit would be with him throughout this whole circumstance, was it a medium that spoke?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Patricky, for this lecture. And thank you, everyone who followed online. We're now going to prepare for our passes.